Okay, folks, this is part two of Excel tutorial 3, Excel module 3. I am looking at page EX154 with some images on it, which shows you the kind of what we're going to be doing next. Please check out the little green boxes. It talks about relative cell references, autofill, if functions, mixed cell references, vertical lookups, um, etc. So sometimes looking at those pictures, like I've said, is really helpful, and students do skip over that. So do check that out. So I'm looking at page 157 at this point, and I've got my Wingate workbook open, and now I'm going to go to the growth worksheet. So this is what this is looking like. So if you check that out and you go to cell D5, so click on cell D5, and we're going to call this day space 1. And I want to drag this. So once you've typed that, click off of it and then click one time back on day 1. Okay, you should be able to see a tiny little plus sign that shows up. Not a fat plus sign, tiny little thin plus sign. And if I drag this down all the way to the bottom of that list, it fills all of that information in. The other thing you can do is you can get your little plus sign and double click it. And as long as there's stuff to the right of it, it'll automatically fill those in as well. So you don't need to retype all that stuff. And you've got all your days automatically entered. So that's steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 on page 157. At the top of page 157, you can see some patterns of things that Excel is really good at figuring out for you. So check those, just check those out a little bit. I think trial and error is probably the best way to go with that. Flip over to page 158. That's what it should be looking like. So just like on my screen. And there's some options for formatting. I'll spare you all this. I'm going to page 159, cell B7. I'm going to go to cell B7. We want to enter the date 4/15/ whatever, 2020. Now I should do it just like the book, that way I don't confuse you. In cell L5, we want to find cell L5. We want to enter the formula equals B7. You click on it, you can type it, whatever it is that works for you. Press the enter key. And in cell L6, we're going to type the formula equals L5 plus 1. Okay, so we're referencing the cell up above this time, and that gives us the next date. So if I click one time on cell L6, and this time if I double click, let's see what happens. So it looks like it's going to find all those upcoming dates, which is cool. Okay, again, you can also drag that down. Okay, I'm at the top of page 160. We're going to change planning dates. So cell B7, we're going to change the value from 415 to 425. And then press the enter key. And then you can see that all those dates over here change as a result of that. So let me put it back to 415. And then you can see it all changed over here as well. So if I redo, yeah, so there's that's kind of the reason why people want to use Excel, because it saves them a lot of time and effort. Some people really like to type. I find typing pretty hard. Okay, so if we go to cell B8, step 1, I'm on page 160, EX 160. Step 1 at the bottom now. We're going to enter the formula equals B8 or B7 plus O12. So not 0, but O, the letter O12. So emergence is 4:30. And that's basically the date that it's going to give me. So emergence comes from O12 over here, right? So it's saying on day 5 is when that happens. So if you add 5 days to 425, it brings you to 4:30. 30 days in April, right? Okay. So we're going to click cell B8, and then we're going to drag this over these next cells. And so what's happening here is, since we have, we did not put any dollar symbols in there, each one of these cells is going to increase by 1. So 12 goes to 13, 13 goes to 14, stays in column O, and B does the same thing, right? So it's going to take the date in the cell up above, and then it's also going to use the information from over here. So the emergence, first leaf, pollination, first grain, solid grains. So solid grains takes 106 days, and wow, that does not seem right at all, does it? Like, you're going to be harvesting solid grains in January? That can't be right. Okay, so stick with me here. So it's just all wrong. And if you look at page 161, it's all wrong on theirs. So we need to fix this, because we need dollar symbols to help us with this. So on page 162, it's giving some explanations on how this works, but basically some things need to remain constant, kind of like taxes. The taxes that you pay at the grocery store are a percentage. So if it's 5%, that's 5 cents on every dollar. That doesn't change. So if you buy more food, or excuse me, more taxable items, that percentage doesn't go up. It stays exactly the same. The prices on the items could change though. So let's just kind of stick with this. I don't want to get into too much detail about this, but basically what we're doing is we're talking about absolute versus relative cell references. So there's one other thing that we could talk about, which is mixed cell references. Mixed cell references have some things that are constant and some things that are not. So for example, if I had a $O, $12, like this. So that's O12, so that's relative. There's no dollar symbols in that at all. So if I added dollar symbols, they would either be absolute or mixed. And you can kind of see how this is working on page 164. So sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. The only way you're going to get good at this is by kind of trying things out a little bit. So that's page 164. On page 165, we're going to actually do some changing here. So we want to go to cell B8, which is the 4/30/2017. Okay? Make sure you're in cell B8. So we have a B7 plus O12. And what they want you to do is they want you to double click down here so you get the formula exposed within the cell itself. And then click somewhere in the B7 part of it. And this only works on Windows computers, and some Windows computers doesn't work at all. So just stay with me here. So what they're saying is that F4 will change how that looks. So you get B7, which is what you had in the beginning. Press it once, you get a $B$7, which is absolute cell reference. There's a mixed cell reference. There's a mixed cell reference. And there's a relative cell reference. Okay? So if I do that in that part of the formula, notice that the O12 doesn't change. You could easily type the dollar symbols. So if you're using a laptop, there's a good chance that that F4 key might not work very good. So if you're on a regular desktop computer like we had in the classroom, the F4 works perfectly. If you're using a Macintosh, I don't know. Good luck. You should do some searching if you really want to use those, because the keystrokes would be a little bit different on a Mac. Okay, so we want this in step 2 on page 165 to read $B$7, O12. Okay, so $B$7 plus O12. Got it changed. I put it back down there. And that works fine. It didn't change it at all. But this time, let's drag this guy down and see what happens. Now things begin to make sense. It's possible that we would be seeing grains and pollination in the month of July. That makes sense. It seems like solid grains would be expected sometime in August. It's still not going to be ready, but it'd be visible to you. So those dates kind of make sense to me. At least it's not winter when you'd be seeing things. So if you move down on page 165, you can see that the image there looks much like mine. Okay, so these are just estimations on when these things would occur, and has a lot to do with how things, how warm it is, how much rain they're going to get, blah blah blah. But this is kind of like what they would expect under normal circumstances. All right, so now moving over to page 166, they're giving you some stuff that looks confusing, but stay with me. If you planted a seed in Antarctica and it was below zero, would it sprout? Maybe. Probably wouldn't live, but it might sprout. It requires heat, though, in order to grow. So it can't be freezing cold all the time. And so that's why we're growing crops in certain times of the year, because it's the right temperatures. It's not too low and it's not too high. If you plant something in the desert in Arizona in the middle of summer, there's a really good chance that it won't grow because it's too hot, just like Antarctica was too cold. So you want it to be just right. So growing degree days gives you kind of a range of, when it could grow if it were really cold, or when it would stop growing if it got too hot. If it gets super duper hot, it might actually die. But there's like a temperature range. So there's a low temperature that it could, still grow a little bit, and there's a high temperature where it could still grow a little bit. That's all GDD is. So there's a sweet spot in there, though. There's an optimal temperature range that you can reach, and that's what we're trying to figure out, is what is that? And that's what we're going to do. So GDD is just a name. So if we called it the growing temperature for that day, maybe that would be helpful for you. So GDD just is an acronym they gave to it. So they want you to click on cell G5, and that's beneath the T min. And they want you to type in this formula: equals max, left parenthesis, E5, comma, $O, $7, and then a right parenthesis. So make sure you've got the comma in there, make sure you have the dollar symbols in there, make sure you have the parentheses in there. And if you press enter, actually before I do that, so you can kind of see here that I'm checking on the min temp and the daily low. So those are the two that are being compared, and I'm picking the maximum of the two. So the maximum function here that we're using is in the minimum column. It's kind of backwards, but it actually does make some sort of sense. So now we want to go tab over, and in the max column, we're going to type the equals, you guessed it, min, left parenthesis, F5, comma, $O, $8, right parenthesis. So double check your work. So this time, instead of checking the daily high, we're checking, or I'm sorry, the daily low, we're checking the daily high, and we're comparing that with the max temp over here on the right side. Okay, so these are constants under the growing temperatures, and what we're working on here are actual things. So we're using the 52 degrees, which was the actual high temperature for that day. And when I press the enter key, it gives me the number 52. Okay? Okay, we're going to move over to cell I5 this time. And this is where that GDD is going to use the two values that we just came up with. So this time we're going to type equals, don't forget your left parenthesis to start it off with, G5 plus H5, right parenthesis. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. Divide it by 2, and then subtract $O, $6. Okay? And we come up with 1.0. So this formula here is actually explained over here. So you could go and you could kind of figure this out if you wanted to. And I just kind of let me redo this. Okay, so equals left parenthesis G5 plus H5, right parenthesis divided by 2, subtract, oops, $O, $6. Okay, and we get 1.0. And that's step 4 on page 166. And the growing degree days for that particular day is 1. So this is an additive process. So as you go through each day, the seed that you had planted accumulates these growing degree days. 1 is not very much, but when you first plant a seed, if it's 45 degrees outside, that's pretty cold. And it didn't get very high, it only got 52. So it's like putting it into a refrigerator. It still might grow a little bit, but not very much. And you can see it gets maybe colder, and then it starts to warm up. It's springtime. Okay, so now we want to select all of these things. So G5, H5, and I5. And we're going to drag that handle all the way down to the bottom. Or you could just double click it instead of dragging. And it fills all those things in. So those numbers in the GDD, you can kind of see what they're doing. As the days get warmer, the numbers increase. But there are times when they get low because the temperature was low for that day. And then they get higher. So you can kind of begin to see how that's going to work. There's one that's 30 growing degree days because it was 74 and 95 that day. The next day, the low was 76, the high was 90, had even more GDD. So you don't need to figure that out. That's what the seed manufacturer, well, not manufacturer, but seed supplier gave to you because they tested it. If you look at the picture on page 167, you should see something similar. Okay, so I told you before that this is a running tally. So it's kind of like going to the grocery store. Each item, so here, is added to the one before it. Okay, so 1 plus 7 equals 8. 8 plus 10 equals 18. 18 plus 13. So it's just like going to Walmart and buying a bunch of stuff. So your subtotal increases as the checker runs your items through the barcode scanner. So in the beginning, though, the cumulative GDD is going to be 1 for the first day. Okay. So we're going to select the range I5 through I163. So all these GDDs. So watch this closely because students tend to click too quickly here. There's a tiny little lightning bolt down here after I have highlighted all these things. So these are the GDD, column I. When I click on that, don't get too carried away here because there's some stuff that we need to choose. So there's 5 different tabs at the top here. But once you get here, there's also an arrow on the right-hand side. Okay? So there's extra stuff. But once you have the totals selected, use that right scroll arrow, step 4 on page 168. It's giving you all of that information on that page with all sorts of stuff. Then we want to, so once we're at the right-hand side of the totals, if we hover over top of the running total, it should give you what you need to be looking for. So if you look real closely, there's like a yellow-orange bar that shows up on the right-hand side. That's the one we want to click on. That's pretty easy. So basically, you calculated the subtotal after each day by using the quick analysis. If you look at your formula, in the formula bar up here, it shows you what each one of those things looks like. Okay? It's actually pretty cool. So that's a running total. All right, so on page 169, we're going to work with some dates and functions. So scroll to the top of the worksheet and then go to cell B4, and that's the current date. So we want to go to the Formulas tab in the ribbon. We want to click on the date and time section, and we're going to find the today function. Okay? So the current date is going to be today. And it's telling you there's no arguments here, and volatile isn't a bad thing. It just means that it changes. That's all. That's all that means. And once you have that, just choose OK. And on page 170, kind of tells you that too. You don't need to add any information there. It automatically does it. But it gives you, in the blue section on page 170, some explanations on how you can use some related functions there. All right, so we're going to use a lookup function now. So a lookup function is similar to, well, let's go back to Walmart. When you buy a can of corn at Walmart and you put it in your cart, there isn't any information about how much that can of corn cost. Once you took it off the shelf, that was the only place there was a price. So when I was a kid, we used to have price stickers on everything. Well, they don't do that anymore because we use barcodes. And then the barcodes allow the computer to figure out what the actual price is at that specific moment. So it does a lookup. It checks the barcode in the computer system as soon as the person scans it, and then it shows up on the screen. Hopefully it's right, but that's a lookup. You do that all the time, all the time. So page 171, we're going to do lookups. If that image there on page 171 helps you, great. It's explaining how we're going to look up things over here in this corn hybrids. So this is going to be our lookup table. So imagine if you worked at Walmart and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 items. You only have 8 items in your store, and this is what we know about them. So we don't need to have prices because we're looking for the maturity dates. In other words, the date when you can do your harvesting. This explains how much corn you actually get out of them, and this explains roughly how tall they're going to get. And this is just their name, is all it is. So name, a description of how much corn you get, a description of how tall it's going to get, and how long it takes for it to produce corn. So this is GDD. So this GDD is what we're going to use to figure out how long things take to come full circle. Okay. Page 172. We're going to use VLOOKUP function to find yield information for the hybrid CS6478. Okay, so go to cell B15 and enter this exactly, 6478. So CS6478. Double check yourself. And then go to cell B16. And we're going to use the lookup and reference, and we're going to choose the VLOOKUP. Not X lookup, but VLOOKUP. And once you have this panel open, you can see that there's 3 of these rows that have bolded text, which means you absolutely have to enter that. We're going to enter information for all of these. So in the lookup value box, we're going to type $B, $15, okay? $B, $15. And then we're going to go to the table array, okay? And we're going to go to, well, in the growth worksheet, we're going to select the range N20 through O27, okay? So you can click this little arrow. And we're going to click these guys here. So that's N20 through Q27. Okay, so make sure you get all 4 of those columns there. And we'll click the little arrow here. And this time we're going to change these to, whoops, no, sorry about that. So F4 is going to change those to absolute cell references. So we want both of them to be $N, $20, and then $Q, $27. And then we're going to go to the column index. And in this case, we're looking for the yield. So if we were to look at our area here, the second column that we chose has the yield inside of it. Okay? And that's what we're trying to do over here, is we're trying to get the yield. So in this case, we want to use the column index of 2 because it's in the second column. It's the second column of all the ones that you chose. And we're going to go to the range lookup, and we're going to type the word false in all caps, It's giving you the answer here, which is very good. The formula result equals very good because that's what it says there. CS6478 is very good. So once you have that, choose OK. And you can compare what you've done in the pane here. If you need to get back to fix it, so click one time on that cell and then choose the f of x, and it'll take you right back to that pane, which will kind of help you to be able to troubleshoot it if you mistype something. And again, there you go. Page 173 gives you the images of how it should look. So this time we're going to select cell B16 and we're going to drag that handle down over the next two. So we're going to copy that directly down. We're going to edit these cells now because we don't want to retype everything. So we're just kind of copying what was in there and we're going to fix it. So we're going to double click on cell B17, and this time instead of using cell or column 2 over yonder, we're looking for the third column. Okay, so find this number 2. And again, the other way you can do this is you can click once on that cell, come up here to the f of x, and change the column 2 to a 3, and then it's going to tell you that it's medium, right? And it's giving me some sort of okay. And the same thing is true here. So we want to change this one from a 2 to a 4. Comes up with 2795. If you look on step 3 on page 174, you should see that as well. Check the picture on page 174. Make sure yours is looking like theirs is. Troubleshoot your formulas now. Don't wait. If you don't have them correct now, stop everything and make sure you've got it fixed up. Okay, go to page 175, and you can look through some of these operators in the picture there. Most of you probably remember some of this stuff. If not, there's your handy little reference for greater than, less than, etc. So this time we're going to do an if function. So you do if functions all the time. So if I sent you to the store and said, go buy bananas, and if the bananas are rotten, buy oranges. So if bananas are good, buy them. If not, then get oranges. So that's an if then. So we're going to select cell K5. And this time we're going to choose the logical button here. And there's not too many logicals, but we're going to choose if. Okay, so there's our if. And in the logical test box, it's giving you the information that you need. J5 greater than or equal to $B $18. And then the value, if true, I would suggest that you type very carefully here. You can type anything you want, but if this cell is greater than the number that's in cell $B $18, which is 27.95, it's going to report yes. If not, it's going to report no. You could become creative here, and you could do something like this, wahoo or no. But I think that most of the time, to keep things consistent, you should probably be simple. So kind of creativity and cool factor can get in the way. So follow those steps very closely. You need to add the double quotes in there so that it knows that it's text. When you choose OK, you can see that it reports back whatever it is that you just said. Okay, so if I change that to nope and choose OK, then it shows nope. Again, just know that you can do other things there if you needed to. Okay, so on page 176, it's showing you an image of what that should look like. It should also show you the formula in step 6. It wants you to click once on cell K5 and then make that go all the way to the bottom. So it says no, 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 and then there's a yes, where it is that number to the left of it exceeds the 2795 number. And move over to page 177. And we're going to go back to the top of the screen here. We're going to select cell B21. And B21 is, we're going to use a VLOOKUP again. Okay, so lookup and reference, VLOOKUP. It brings up our panel here. And what we're looking for is the word yes, capital Y-E-S. I put double quotes around it because it's text. And the table array that we're looking for is the K and L columns, because one of them is going to have the number, or I'm sorry, the text in it, the no or the yes, and then the second one is going to have the date, because we're going to need both of them. We're going to compare the first column with what you've got in the lookup value, and then the second column is the one that's going to have the information that we want. So that'll be in the second column, number 2. And we type false mostly so that it's an exact match. If you left it alone and didn't type the word false in all caps, it's going to try to be smart and might actually make a mistake because it's looking for fuzzy matches. So in this case, the harvest is going to be on September 5th. And that seems perfectly reasonable to me. I'm just thinking from like a gardening perspective. You wouldn't be harvesting in the springtime normally for corn. Okay. So now they want us to check cell B15 and then change it from CS 6478 to 6489. Enter. And then you get different information that comes back. So excellent tall 2920 and then September 10th instead of September 5th. That's on page 178. On page 179, it gives you, if there's some errors with an if function, okay? You can read through all that if you want to. And page 180, there's nothing to do, and you have completed this. So what I want you to do, though, is to try to make sure you look at the explanation of formulas. And there's one thing that I also want to make sure that each one of you remembers. For this GDD formula in the review, it's not going to be the same. If you try to do it the same way you've done it here for the review, it will be wrong. So you have to look at the formula, the explanation of the formulas to see what the differences are. It's the only review project that does it this differently. But in this particular case, they're giving you the Tmin and the Tmax here. It's different with the review. So just a word of caution. The other stuff is very similar. The yield history, But in this growth, these three things may be different. So just be careful. Check them, check them, check them. So let me know if you have questions. Put comments in the video down below, and hopefully this has been somewhat helpful. If you have thoughts or suggestions, let me know to try to make these a little bit more helpful. The next Excel tutorial that we do is going to be, I don't think more complicated, but it'll be a little bit different. So if you have some thoughts before I create the next video, please do let me know so we can um, get things fixed up or altered, however it works. So don't forget to submit this into the Excel tutorial. And then also don't forget to do the review. It's not quite as complicated, but it's a little bit different. So take a look at that, and also make sure you do your quiz. Those are all due on April 5th. So take a look. Let me know. Thanks.